Hello, my name is Mr. Burns. I believe you have a letter for me.
Okay, Mr. Burns. What's your first name?
I don't know.
Hello, and welcome to the season finale of The Simpsons Countdown, the podcast where we go back to the beginning and watch all of The Simpsons to trace the creative evolution of the series and count down, finding the exact moment in which it began its inevitable decline. I'm Erix Antoine, and this week I am once again welcoming my friend Mike Drew Flynn to the podcast. We'll be discussing the episode Blood Feud, which originally aired in the US on July 11th, 1991. In this episode, Mr. Burns is sick and dying until he gets a blood transfusion from Bart, which Homer was hoping would be richly rewarded. When all Burns does is send a thank you card, Homer goes on a kind of warpath, incurring Burns' wrath. Until Mr. Burns has a change of heart and decides to reward the Simpsons with a present after all, a giant Olmec god statue. It's an extremely all over the place, but also very funny episode that encapsulates fully that transitional period in which The Simpsons went from being a rough-around-the-edges animated sitcom to a legendary bastion of social commentary and contemporary satire. Flynn and I are about to discuss just that. So without further ado, here we go. So this is the final episode of the season, and
Yes.
it comes at the end of a season that was still sort of experiencing some growing pains because it sort of ebbed. It had like its ups and downs. It was generally a good season, but it's sort of like it slowly built to a kind of climactic moment. It's sort of built to a very satisfying crescendo of the last bunch of episodes generally being very funny and of a very high quality. But the one thing that I wanted to throw your way is that because I don't know if we discussed this, we didn't. I don't think that we did, so I want to throw it your way just in case.
Right.
About halfway through the season,
Yeah.
a little bit less than halfway. I couldn't tell you exactly how many episodes in, but it was around Bart the Daredevil that I came up with a theory. This is already like the third or fourth time I've been talking about this on the podcast, but I came up with a little bit of a theory that, you know how we have the whole thing, the whole concept of the television show Jumping the Shark, right?
Sure, yeah.
Which is the reference to Happy Days.
Right.
Right. That's like old news. We know that. So in Bart the Daredevil, what happens? Well, Bart Simpson, well, actually Homer Simpson, jumps Springfield Gorge. So I came up with a theory where the opposite of jumping the shark is jumping the gorge.
Jumping the gorge.
Because jumping the gorge. Because basically what I started to notice is that Bart the Daredevil kind of marked a turning point for the show.
Sure.
Because
yeah.
from that point on, we started with this uptick in quality that you really did start to see as the episodes that came after Bart the Daredevil, you started to see things going in a direction that was a lot more ambitious. The scope was widened. The humor just got richer. And it was progressive. It wasn't this thing where it's like no, it wasn't every single episode, but you started to really see some real gems after Bart the Daredevil. Before Bart the Daredevil, you had good episodes before Bart the Daredevil. And then Bart the Daredevil itself is like a classic episode. It continues to be a classic episode today. And then after Bart the Daredevil, that's when you really start to see some real classics. And so, and then towards the end of the season, you get some really, really funny episodes. And so the final episode of the season, this one, Blood Feud, what I will say about it is that it is incredibly funny. Like, it's just a gag a minute kind of thing. Like, it's just full of amazingly funny gags. It includes my all-time favorite Simpsons gag, which is when Homer goes to try to get the letter from the post office. That one moment.
Yeah.
That thing, that exchange, where he's just like, my name is Mr. Burns. I believe you have a letter for me. Sure, what's your first name? I don't know. That, anytime I think about it, I laugh. And it stays with me. It stayed with me for years.
What's funny about that bit is that the voice that he affects as quote unquote Mr. Burns is very similar to what he ends up doing as Guy Incognito much later on.
Yeah, it's basically, it's pretentious Homer voice.
Yes.
That's essentially what it is.
I do want to expound on your point about jumping the gorge with regards to this episode, which is that I noticed it feels a lot more typical than the other early episodes that we've discussed and have been discussed on the show. It feels more like something that would have fallen into that sweet spot between seasons 4 and 9 where everybody loved the show. It truly feels like that.
Yes, yeah, it definitely does. I mean, what we're going to notice beginning in season 3, that's where we'll see that's really where the golden age begins.
Yes.
Season 3 is kind of a preamble. Everybody talks about how seasons 4 through 9, as you just said, are like the golden age, right?
Yes, that's correct.
But season 3 is sort of like the preamble, because season 3, it's got a couple of rough spots, but it's generally also full of classic episodes. So we are now at the moment where The Simpsons is going to become the show that it's famous for being, the classic series that it is.
And I think during season 2, what Barbara Bush said about it attracted a lot of negative publicity, or conversely, it put a spotlight right on the Fox network because, as we all know, The Simpsons was airing alongside stuff like In Living Color, Married with Children, shows that were pissing off the fundamentalists right and left. And The Simpsons, while mild, had a child anarchist in Bart, and everybody was focused on that, and nobody thought much of Homer being a responsible father figure, and we were still at a point where we worship Bill Cosby as a moral guardian.
Yes. But actually, well, here's the thing. Actually, now that you brought that up, isn't that weird? Like, think about it. Think about, this is the 90s, and Fox is synonymous with edgy entertainment.
Yes.
Okay. Edgy, irreverent entertainment. Because you've got, as you just said, the shows you just mentioned, In Living Color, okay, a sketch comedy show very much built around the idea of diversity, of, the idea that it's a sketch comedy show created by people of color.
Yes.
And with a diverse cast.
And I think they had to have been 25 years ahead of their time on that show. Holy shit.
They may have been. I mean, sure, there's stuff that if you go and watch some old clips, there's some stuff that would, quote unquote, today be considered problematic. But my point is that the concept of In Living Color, don't you remember, like, I'll just bring up one sketch right away, one serial sketch, the handicapped superheroes. Okay, that is something that today would be seen as, it wouldn't pass muster.
I thought you were going for Men on Film.
Well, that too. That's too.
I find Men on Film fucking hilarious because I know what it is. I know that they're specifically making fun of the stereotypes.
I have a consumer alert for all our viewers. The film Black Stallion is not about Denzel Washington.
There's another skit that's hilarious in that show, and I think it's in this same season that The Simpsons is running concurrently with the Spike Lee video store. And it's a direct Do the Right Thing parody where Spike Lee is running this video store that kind of looks like a Blockbuster, and there's a Mo Better Blues poster in the window, and Do the Right Thing stuff, and Malcolm X caps are available for sale. And every time a white person, and I don't know if another ethnicity comes in that pisses him off, but he gets really angry at the clientele.
Is this, does Damon Wayans play Spike Lee?
I want to say it's either Keenan Ivory Wayans or Tommy Davidson.
Oh, okay.
It's not Damon Wayans.
These people eventually worked with Spike Lee.
Yeah.
So
Wayans did.
Wayans certainly did. And But in any case, what I was getting at was, okay, so you had like In Living Color, right? It was
Right.
an irreverent, anti-establishment comedy show. You have The Simpsons, a satirical, social commentary. It's aimed at a mainstream audience, but there's enough irreverence there. It's a show that's written and conceived by liberals,
Yes.
liberal boomers. Even Married with Children, you could look at that as a satire of the blue collar family, a very irreverent look at that, at the basic working class, middle aged American man as portrayed by Ed O'Neill in a very kind of satirical vein. This is a popular show.
Yes.
So all these shows, eventually the X Files comes along, and the X Files has very much it's very anti government. So look at what Fox was. And at this point, this is like the early 90s and up to the mid 90s. And so Fox was synonymous with irreverent entertainment that was anti establishment. And then you have Fox News, which became a conservative haven. So it's so weird to me. And both things are owned by Rupert Murdoch. I mean,
Yeah.
both things are owned by News Corp. So it's strange to me. And I think even back then it was owned by News Corp. I mean, I think even back then Rupert Murdoch was the owner.
It was News Corp. I don't know if News Corp had its name yet. I know that Metro Media bought Fox in the mid 80s. That's when or no. I have it mixed up. Murdoch bought Metro Media in the 80s, and he bought Fox, and that came together because Metro Media was who owned the independent affiliates that became Fox affiliates. So WNEW became Fox in 86 or so, for example.
And it was already owned by Rupert Murdoch at that point.
Murdoch owned it at that point in the mid to late 80s. I should also mention The Simpsons, of course, is a Fox production and still continues to be produced by 20th TV, quote unquote. And
20th Century Studios.
Yeah, I don't fucking abide by that. They're still Fox. They're still Fox. It's still a Fox movie. I don't care. Back to
it's still the same fanfare. It's still the same logo. But okay, but go on.
I just 20th Century Studios sounds dumb. Can't they just bring back Touchstone and be done with it? Like
Silver Screen Partners 4.
Yeah, Silver Screen Partners reboot. Get Richard Dreyfuss back in theatrical movies or whatever. But where I was going with this was Married with Children was a embassy production. And it became a Columbia production, and then Sony buys Columbia, and it becomes a Columbia TriStar thing, and now it's owned by Sony. So they were taking independent, or they were taking third-party productions, and they were pushing the envelope in every way possible. Like, you could see Married with Children as a bizarro Cosby show. You could see The Simpsons as this thing that nobody's really tried in primetime for decades, which is to bring back an animated sitcom. Nobody had done anything that big on the level of that since the Flintstones and the Jetsons were around.
Right.
And it worked. And I think what worked is that we had gotten to a point where people within Gen X and millennial generations understand it, that we've lived most of our lives with The Simpsons in them. So the more controversy that got piled on during season 2 and the more awareness that was put on, I think that put the hot coals to the feet for the writers to start getting more progressive and edgier. And when you look at it, Blood Feud is not only the season finale for season 2, it aired in mid-July of 91.
Yeah, so it was almost like a season 3 preview. It's kind of in a limbo because it was produced. It's almost a season 3 episode essentially.
For all intents and purposes, yeah, they were working on it, and this was back when the summer was considered a graveyard. But what I think Fox was smart to do was they strategically took airtime and were able to throw the producers extra episodes, and they put them up during weekends in the summer where nobody was going to be doing much. For example, this aired July 11th, 1991, which would have put this a week after 4th of July. So this is from the Wikipedia article. Blood Feud was part of the season 2 production run, but was completed behind schedule. It was originally broadcast on July 11th, 1991, as part of the Fox Network's premiere week. Fox aired new episodes of several of its top shows, including The Simpsons and Beverly Hills 90210, in hopes of expanding the normal 30-week primetime season and gaining new viewers for the fall. Although Three Men and a Comic Book was the official season 2 finale, Blood Feud is considered part of the second season and was included in this complete second season DVD box set.
It's notable because what I do understand is that, we'll eventually get to this, but the season premiere of season 3, the official season premiere, is the Michael Jackson episode.
Stark Raving Dad, correct.
Yeah, and that episode, as I understand it, was actually produced during season 2.
Stark Raving Dad was the final episode in the season 2 production run, but aired as the premiere of season 3 over a year after it was completed.
Right, that makes sense. So it was like, and they figured, because they were like, this is a big episode, we can't just throw it out there. It would be an excellent way to start the third season. You couldn't do the thing where you were like, oh yeah, Michael Jackson's going to be in this episode, and throw it on in the summer. To start it with the season, though, is inspired. And it's also worth noting that they reran it on January 30th, 1992, featuring a brief alternate opening that addressed the feud between George and Barbara Bush and the show. Right.
And it said, the writers decided to respond privately, sending a polite letter to Bush in which they posed as Marge Simpson. Bush immediately sent a reply in which he apologized. Later, on January 27, 1992, George Bush made a speech during his re-election campaign, which included the statement, "We are going to keep on trying to strengthen the American family, to make American families a lot more like the Waltons and a lot less like the Simpsons." Guess who did not win their re-election campaign?
Right. Well, I mean, here's the thing about that, and we've briefly spoken about this with, I believe with Josh Fine, we talked about it. He did say something to the effect, and I believe this, he doesn't think that George Bush even watched The Simpsons, and he's probably right. And it's like,
I don't think he did.
That line was thrown on there by some smart-ass speechwriter who just, it was just a very stupid thing to put there.
I think the only presidents that may have watched The Simpsons, I would say Obama likely did. I would say Clinton likely did. And I would maybe say W caught an episode or two and laughed.
Yeah, well, you know who else clearly watched The Simpsons? As we found out during 2015, Ted Cruz is apparently a Simpsons fan. Yeah, I don't know if you ever watched those embarrassing videos of him like quoting The Simpsons and trying to like imitate the voices. It's the most embarrassing thing I've ever seen in my life.
I've seen that shit. It haunted my dreams.
Smithers, release the hounds. Excellent.
Look, Ted Cruz is a horrible human being.
Yes.
And the fact that his side hobbies include doing Simpsons impressions makes me more unsettled about his presence in our government. And I hope he does not get the jokes.
I don't think he does.
I don't think he gets the jokes. It's kind of like when you get somebody who's right wing to watch RoboCop, and their takeaway is, "Oh, they killed this cop. He came back as a robot and killed everybody that killed him. Blue Lives Matter." But really, RoboCop is a statement against capitalism, and it's about a consumer product that kills his enemies. It's a very liberal and progressive film. Like, there are so many movies that right-wing people watch and they think, "Oh my God, this is my fever dream." And I'm kind of like, what the fuck are you talking about? For example, I have long advocated that the Lethal Weapon franchise, with the exception of the fourth movie, is probably the most liberal action franchise to ever exist. because you've got spooky CIA Oliver North types in the first one. You've got, of course, the fascist South Africans in the second one. You've got a crazy real estate developer whose evil scheme involves armor.
Corrupt cop. He's a corrupt cop.
Yeah, corrupt cop.
He's a corrupt cop. He's
Selling,
a bad apple.
He's a bad apple. And in the third one, he's a boring character, but he sells armor-piercing bullets, and he goes down deservedly.
It's weird. Right-wingers, it is kind of strange. A lot of right-wingers enjoy The Simpsons. They enjoy Star Trek. They enjoy things that you think, are you paying attention to what you're watching?
Yeah.
This is kind of pointing a finger at you. Hey there, my podcast listeners, all 7 or 8 of you, please listen up. Do you like the X-Files? Well, then you might be interested in my new podcast, Discovering the X-Files, in which I, a confessed newbie, go through the entire series as longtime fans walk me through it. If you're a fan, here's a good opportunity for you to revisit the series and follow along with me. If you're a newbie like me, then why not jump in and join me on this voyage of discovery? Either way, it's a good talk and a good time. So check out Discovering the X-Files, posting twice a week, Mondays and Fridays, on Anchor FM, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and other podcast platforms, or on the Erix Antoine Network on YouTube. Hope to see you there. And now back to the Simpsons Countdown. This particular episode I think, has a lot of interesting elements in it. The story's a little bit all over the place, but as I was saying, there's so many really funny gags, and it's little things. Like, I love that one scene, when that's also very funny, when Homer gets the card and he's all right, and he gets the whole family together, and they all go outside into and he's like reading it out loud. He's like, okay, it's just a card. And it's like this whole thing. And he's like, Lisa, do something, and then and she turns on the sprinklers. And then when they realize that there's nothing going on, he's like, Homer's just staying there steaming, and the whole family walks back in. And on her way back into the house, Lisa turns off the sprinkler. That's very, very funny. It's like that sort of visual comedy is just like that stuff always gets to me.
Some way to show your gratitude. No gold, no diamonds, no ruby, not even a lousy card. Wait a minute, there was a card. That's what got me so mad in the first place.
That statue head is fucking great. Like, of all the things Mr. Burns could pay them back with, he decides on an immovable fucking... It looks like the prop Stonehead from Zardoz.
Extrapolapaketl.
It's the Olmec god of war. And you have that whole subplot of Lisa trying to teach Maggie things. And so that's another, like, I love that bit where, like, she pulls up the flashcard that says Aztec on it, and she's like,
no, Maggie, not Aztec, Olmec. Olmec.
It's just full of really, really funny gags.
Extrapolapaketl.
It's the first time, I think, at least in my experience, that Burns pisses off Homer and it becomes a hero-villain sort of thing. Does that make sense?
I think I can follow your logic, because this is something that would come back later on. We would see more of this in later episodes.
Because Burns becomes a recurring antagonist, and I'm pretty sure this is the first one where he's a threat.
Well, he already is essentially he's the de facto villain, quote unquote, of The Simpsons. That's why they made him the villain of the arcade game. But so he's like the de facto villain. If there's like a villain, like a main villain in The Simpsons, it would be Mr. Burns. But I guess this is the first time where there's like a direct connection.
Extrapolapaketl.
Because everybody, by the end of the episode, the family's pleased with what, they're happy. Like Bart's happy with the head. They got results, whatever. The only one who continues to kind of be stewing over it is Homer, because Homer wanted, money.
Oh, it's classic Homer revenge. He wants revenge because he didn't get paid. It's
right. It's essentially and this is a theme, and the theme of, I guess, Homer's irrelevance in the eyes of Burns is something that would continue to be explored. Like, it's already there, right? We've seen it from the beginning. The fact that Burns never remembers him, never remembers his name, none of that. There's a meta gag aspect to that because, of course, since every episode restores the status quo, it doesn't really matter. But the fact is, they always do a play on of Homer never remembering him, never realizing who he is, even though he's been involved in many things. And then I guess they start to really build on that in later episodes. And in this episode is the first one where Homer is directly affected and directly goes on the warpath against Mr. Burns. So I guess there's a case to be made that there is it is kind of an inception point for that running thread.
Extrapolapaketl.
I mean, they'll expand upon this theme a lot more later. Not that they haven't done it at all before, but I think that, yes, in future episodes, you'll see more of this. And so this is probably the first time that you have this direct sort of relationship where Homer is expecting something of Burns and Burns screws him over.
Right.
It's probably the first time that really happens, like in that direct way, and it won't be the last. So that is an interesting thing to consider.
Extrapolapaketl.
Something else that the episode does, and I think it's interesting, is that it focuses on the Smithers-Burns relationship in a non-salacious way. Yeah, because later on they'll start making a lot of salacious jokes about Smithers being in love with Mr. Burns, and they'll push it to extremes that are very comical. But here there's a very genuine affection. We saw a little bit of this in the previous episode, Brush with Greatness. We saw Smithers essentially speaking of Burns very affectionately to Marge and saying how he's his best friend. And here we see more of that, how he genuinely cares for him, and he's moved by the event. He's very grateful to them for what they've done. And you really see that. I mean, it's actually there's a funny scene, but there's a bittersweet element to when Smithers is hiring the goon to go beat up Homer.
Right.
And he can't bring himself to do it.
You know Homer Simpson?
Yeah, nice guy. Play poker with him once in a while.
Mm-hmm. We need him beaten up.
You got it.
Wait.
What is it?
Beat, but don't kick.
Hold the kicks. Got it.
Wait.
What?
Hey,
what did homie do anyway?
He saved Mr. Burns' life.
So you watched this episode, as I understand correctly, you've repeatedly mentioned that you have a file of like original airings of The Simpsons.
I do, yes.
Including ads and all of that. And
that is correct.
I think it's amazing that you have that, and that's a great resource. But so I'd be curious. So I'm assuming that this episode was from that file. Like you watched an original airing of it, or something close to an original airing.
It was an October '92 rerun that I saw. So some of the promos that showed up on this, that I laughed at. First of all, the file starts in the middle of a current affair expose on someone named Henry Mudd.
Henry Mudd. Henry Mudd?
Henry Mudd. Not Harry Mudd, Henry Mudd.
Okay.
For you trekkers out there. And then the teaser for tomorrow night's episode involves Joey Buttafuoco and the return of the nightclub scene in New York City.
Amy Fisher is a liar and has zero credibility.
I would also like to add that before it starts, there is a promo for the hit Fox series The Heights.
Speaking of like obscure television shows from the early 90s, many of which were on Fox, wasn't Hooperman on Fox?
No, that was ABC, even though it was
I see.
a Fox production. Yeah, if you can't get Chris on the show, you get me.
Wednesday, Hooperman becomes a father.
When we, didn't you use...
Of course I did.
A new Hooperman on its way.
Broken Badges.
Broken Badges, yeah.
That was Fox. That was Fox, yes?
That was a Fox production. No, that was CBS.
Wow.
Yeah.
Sister Kate, that was a Fox show.
No, that was ABC.
Jesus Christ. Okay, it was all these like shows from the early 90s that nobody remembers.
Extrapolapaketl.
The Edge.
Oh, yeah, I remember The Edge.
So I know about this is the end tag during the credits. they advertised that next week is going to be the Simpsons Halloween special, and it's going to be hosted by the Edge's Julie Brown.
When you look inside and see that your dream has died, you cry and cry, but it'll be okay, 'cause today is your lucky day.
Reflections on the second season of The Simpsons, right? We started out this conversation, so I told you about my theory about jumping the gorge, right? And I guess you buy that theory.
I absolutely agree.
So we get to this point where, as you said, this is an episode that aired in the middle of the summer. It's technically a season 3 episode. And as I was saying before, like, it's full of gags. It's full of like rapid fire, funny gags. It has that sort of wackiness, this element to it that it feels like a season 3, season 4 episode.
It does.
And because of everything that's going on in there, all the different gags that are just very, very funny. So I don't know. What are your thoughts?
On the second season, I think it's where the show starts to develop its personality. Absolutely.
I think it's interesting if you, instead of looking at it as like a second season, I think it's more like looking at the first 35 episodes of the series as a kind of chunk, you know, as this is early Simpsons. You know, season 1 and season 2 are very different, and there is a marked difference. When you look at the first season, it's really rough. You know,
it's very rough.
And we talked about that because we discussed the first season when we sat down to talk about the Some Enchanted Evening, you know, the season finale of the first season, and we discussed the roughness of the first season and how there's very little there that you can look back on as being anything. And like last week, speaking with my guest with Clay, and you know, he point blank was because he hadn't watched the first season in years, and he basically asked him, he threw it to me. He was going like, you know, he couldn't even remember anything memorable from the first season. He couldn't remember any classic episodes, and he was hard pressed to come up with anything. And you know, I don't blame him. And you yourself said how you find the first season unwatchable. You've said that to me many times.
Yeah, it's a very hard thing to watch
because things are off. Things are a bit off. Character models are off. The voices aren't quite there yet. Things like that it just feels really weird. It feels like a completely different show. And yeah, it definitely is a thing where you look at the second season, and that's where you really do see how it develops. I think that's what we can say about the second season as being notable, is that in the second season you see the development process of The Simpsons. It's like a transitional season where you go from like the rough edges of the first season, which many people might consider unwatchable now, and maybe you couldn't blame them. And then you have this sort of bridge between the really rough thing where you look at that and you go, how did this last 30 years? Well, when you look at the development of season 2, you go like, this is how. Because over an entire season, over like 22 episodes or whatever it is, they managed to like, you know, iron out the kinks, as they say. It's a cliche, but that's what they say. So they did take basically an entire season, an entire 22 episode season, to figure out what they wanted to do with the show. That's basically what it is. And then they began to implement that during the third season. So it's like they took a whole season to figure out what The Simpsons, what they wanted it to be, and where they wanted to go with it. And they sort of freed themselves to then explore what they wanted to do with the show. So yeah, I mean, this has been an interesting experience going through the first 2 seasons of The Simpsons, and I'm really, really pumped for the third season because
that's going to be a good one.
Yeah, I mean, here is where you start to see some real classics. So yeah, I mean, it's stuff to look forward to.
Marge, what does it do?
Doesn't do anything.
Marge, really, what does it do?
Whatever it does, it's doing it now.
Well, I'll let you get acquainted with Senor Extrapolapakettle.
So, like, what's our final word on this episode?
I think this is a season 2 highlight.
Yeah, it has a lot of really funny stuff. But I think it's more notable for that. I think it encapsulates what the whole season is. I think this episode represents it in one episode, because the whole season is sort of this developing process of taking it from that rough early show, the first season, taking it from those rough edges and sort of, ironing it out until it starts to become something more polished and getting on the way to what it would become eventually. And even though it was already a phenomenon, I mean, let's not kid ourselves. It was The Simpsons were already a phenomenon by this point, but in terms of the quality of the show, right? So I think that this one episode sort of represents in just one thing, all the different, I guess, lessons that they learned, the writers and the showrunners and everybody, like what they learned about it and where they thought they could go with it. I think this one episode has all of those things in one. It has the wacky story that's very outlandish.
Yes.
But it is a story. It's a good story. It's well constructed. It has, a well constructed plot that leads to a satisfying ending, and it's peppered with outrageous gags, very funny gags, a combination of witty like dialogue and very funny visual gags as well. And like it basically encapsulates everything that we would come to love about The Simpsons. You can find it in this one episode, I think. And because it's in an early form, but you can already see in this one episode all the things that we would come to love about the show.
Right.
And I think that's what makes it special. So yeah, I mean, I want to thank you for sitting down to talk with me about this. It was fun.
Yeah, absolutely. Pleasure.
So that's it for this week's installment of The Simpsons Countdown. And it also marks the completion of our second season. Thank you for joining us. And a very special thanks if you're one of those listeners who's been there from the start. Consider showing your support in the simplest of ways. Give us a like or a favorable rating. This podcast is available on Apple, Spotify, Anchor FM, and other podcasting platforms. So adding a brief review might actually help boost the podcast's profile. And if it isn't too much trouble, please do share this with all your friends on social media. At this point, The Simpsons Countdown will go on a brief hiatus. And we'll be back in December. In the meantime, though, you have plenty of time to catch up with the first two seasons. Or maybe you are already caught up, and maybe you like The X-Files, in which case I would recommend you check out my recently launched podcast, Discovering the X-Files, which drops twice a week on Monday and Friday, and is also available on the aforementioned podcasting platforms as well as on my YouTube channel. I'm Erix Antoine, and I'll be back in December with Season 3 of The Simpsons, starting with the classic, now quote-unquote cancelled episode, Stark Raving Dad, which will almost certainly give my guests and I a bunch to talk about for obvious reasons, and the discussion may or may not go in the direction you may think, because that's the way we do things on The Simpsons Countdown. We like to keep it light, we also like to keep you on your toes. In any case, thank you for listening, and thank you in advance for supporting the podcast in any way that you can. Stay safe out there. See you next season.
But Dad, I'm a vegetarian. I don't eat animals.
But Lisa, animals...
Shh.